Thanks so much for tuning in and welcome. I'm Wade Crowfoot. I serve as our California Natural Resources Secretary. Here with me is my colleague Amanda Hansen. Amanda serves as our Deputy Secretary for all things climate change. Many of you may have joined us for what we call a Secretary Speaker Series, essentially a Zoom discussion before. But if you haven't, welcome. For those who have joined us, know that we have these conversations with a few different tools that we hope increases the interactivity of the discussion. So we use the chat function throughout our conversation today. My colleague Geeta Chandra, who does a wonderful job organizing these discussions, staffs the chat function. So as we share different people we're working with or talking about, Geeta will share links on them or links on topics or organizations. It's kind of fun to have the chat box open so you can click on different information sources. Also, at any point in the conversation, if you want to ask a question, share an observation, you can do so by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. That'll come to Amanda and I'll be looking at those throughout our discussion, and I'll try to work in those questions. Sometimes if we have time, we're able to provide the answer on the keyboard. And then once we provide the answer, everyone will see both the question and the answer. We're recording the conversation today, and it will be available by tomorrow morning on our Natural Resources Agency website. And with that recording will be a copy of all the information in the links. So don't feel like you have to take specific notes if you're seeing information on the links. Just visit our website tomorrow. So Amanda and I are obviously coming to you from Brazil at the end of a third day of this global summit of mayors and governors, governments from around the world that are driving forward on climate change. And we're going to spend the next hour breaking down this discussion, this UN climate summit, what we're hearing, why we're here, and ultimately why it's important to California and the rest of the world. So Amanda, I want to start by asking you to provide just a high-level overview of these UN climate summits. Before working for the Newsom administration, you have worked in the U.S. State Department as a climate negotiator, actually for the U.S. federal government. So you're sort of a veteran of these UN COPs. Explain to us what this is all about and why are we calling this COP 30?
Absolutely. So just over 30 years ago, countries from around the world actually came together here in Rio to agree to a convention that committed everyone to taking action on climate change.
And a convention is kind of a fancy word for a treaty.
A treaty,
okay.
Exactly. And the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change organizes annual meetings of all of the parties to the convention. So anyone who has signed on to this treaty, they get together every single year and they negotiate how are we going to move forward together. Early days of those.
And that's called the Conference of Parties, or a COP.
A COP, exactly. So we're at COP 30. So this is the 30th annual convening. And I would just say at a high level, only nation states can be party to the convention. So the people who are negotiating, they're negotiating on behalf of the country that they're representing. And for many, many years, the focus of those conversations was on level of ambition. What do we need to do to collectively protect ourselves and our future from the worst impacts of climate change? And there were many attempts to set a collective goal. And finally, in Paris at COP 15, was that COP 15?
I think about it as over 10 years ago.
Over 10 years ago. In 2015,
yeah,
that's where the international community came together and agreed to a collective commitment to not allow temperatures to exceed 1.5 degrees. So we finally set that collective global climate change goal. And since then, the world has really begun to shift into, well, now we gotta hit that goal, and
right.
It's time to implement. So what I've seen over time, especially since joining the California team, there's incredible focus on the negotiations, and they'll continue to need to move forward. But now that we've set our goal and we know what we need to do to get there, there is an increasing focus on implementation. And implementation, it does happen at the national level, but it happens across all of society. So subnational governments, those are governments that are states, regions, cities, are incredibly important implementers, as is the private sector, as are philanthropic partners. So the world of implementation is much bigger, and it's really exciting to see this sort of shifted attention and focus on making sure implementers have what they need to get it done.
Yeah, and all the while climate change is accelerating, and our different populations around the world are experiencing these intensified impacts of climate change. A lot of people, over the last few years that we've been doing this, say we used to have a crisis of ambition where, nations weren't fully buying into the amount of pollution that they needed to reduce. But to your point, big breakthrough in Paris 10 years ago. Collective target. Every nation is setting sort of comparable or similar pollution reduction targets, transition targets. And now the challenge is we're not collectively on track to meet that target. And if we don't, limit global average pollution, or sorry, temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius, we have worse and worse impacts. So now we're talking, we hear a lot about the implementation crisis. So what I'm excited about, and I want your reflections, is, California has played such a big role in these discussions because we come as a very large economy in the world, in this case, now the fourth largest economy in the world. So people are paying attention to, one, our level of ambition, but two, our implementation. So how have you experienced the role of states and regions and cities? Is it changing now that we're really focused on how do we move further and faster?
Well, I'll admit to you and everyone who's joined us today that the first time I came to one of these big annual climate convenings, a COP with the California team, I was a little bit unclear about what we'd be doing. And I think Wade, but I'll share with our audience that I was really impressed with the kinds of conversations that California has at these conferences of the parties. You go there as a national government and you are negotiating. You are focused on achieving your country's objectives, figuring out where other countries are, and trying to bridge differences. So the conversations we have at the subnational level are, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time. And then boom, immediately into, how did you do that? How did you fill in the blank? And the blanks are countless, protecting affordability as we transition to clean energy, avoiding the impacts of drought on water supply and water quality, like really, really tangible conversations where we truly learn from one another, which is very different from the role of negotiators. And both are needed, but they're really different. And so that I really learned a lot through that first COP.
Yeah, and we have some examples of discussions we've had this week, just to that point about how we learn from each other and ultimately emulate each other to move further and faster. But I want to start off as, one of the important reasons that we're here again this year, and so are other states, including a couple of our governors that we shared the stage with from New Mexico and Wisconsin. The rest of the world, climate change is a global challenge. Goes without saying. And so we need collective action across the world. We can be proud of our progress in California, but there needs to be comparable progress around the world, because after all, this is one global atmosphere. So part of why we're here is to share our ambitions and our progress, but drive the rest of the world forward too, as a strong voice. Now, this year, our federal government is totally missing in action. We may be one, if not the only national government that's not participating in this climate summit in Brazil. And the rest of the world needs to understand that America is still in this fight and we're moving forward. We're really proud to be part of a coalition of states with just that message. Now we've collected a few videos over the last 3 days, and we're going to share those to emphasize points in our discussion. And why don't we roll this first video right now on this point? Now, California is so proud to be one of 24 states that's part of the U.S. Climate Alliance. Those American states that are driving forward, slashing carbon pollution, transitioning to clean energy economy, and protecting our people in the process. I'm joined by Casey Kadams, who is leading this U.S. Climate Alliance. So thankful for your leadership, bringing governors down to share what's happening in the United States. Talk about what news you're making at the U.S. Climate Alliance here in Rio.
Absolutely. So today we launched our 2025 annual report detailing how states and territories across our coalition in the United States have already driven down our greenhouse gas pollution by 24% over the last 18 years. So that's huge. That's nearly a quarter of our emissions that we have already eliminated. And at the same time, we've grown our GDP, our economy, by 34%. So we are here to tell the global community that no matter what anyone in the White House says, states and governors in the United States are still making progress on our climate goals, and we're showing that climate action and economic growth go hand in hand.
It's incredible. You know, such an important message for the global community, given this federal government's hostility to climate action. The U.S. Climate Alliance literally doing the math, demonstrating what has been done to slash carbon pollution and what we're doing collectively. It's a message that's really welcome here. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Onward together.
Onward.
So you get the point, which is, you know, we have a coalition of states, including a bunch of mayors, including California mayors, who are here explaining to people that our brand of federalism vests real authority in our states, the United States of America, and that no single president can erase that. And as a result, we're moving forward. That's a really welcome message, wouldn't you say, Amanda? Because they want to understand, as the largest economy in the world, that we're not sitting on our hands.
Absolutely. And I will just say, you know, California has sent a delegation to these annual climate conferences for years. And that's built a lot of credibility, where our federal government has kind of gone in and out and in and out. California's been there. I'm witnessing the number of local leaders who have come into the international climate space and said, not only, you know, are we all in, but don't count us out, because we're building the economies of the future, is impressive. And it really does speak volumes to the international climate community, where there is major concern of the U.S. walking away.
Yeah, I just came back from a multilateral meeting with 3 Brazilian governors and a couple of our American governors and other states like New York and Colorado. And it's pretty interesting. The Brazilians, you know, give us a lot of encouragement, because they formed their own version of they call it the Green Consortium, when they had a leader, Bolsonaro, who was hostile to climate, advanced deforestation, and it was states that came together to explain they were still in. So it's just interesting that states and cities are playing this anchoring role, regardless of who the federal leader is. Now, Amanda, you mentioned this information exchange that happens. As we like to say, we copy good ideas and we share ones of our own. I want to roll the next video with the leader from Adelaide, Australia, who we were in a session with, and we were really impressed by their progress. I'd never met this mayor, actually, but I grabbed her after the session to say, hey, can I interview you to share with our folks in California just how much progress you're making in Australia? I got to meet the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Australia, Jane Lomax-Smith. And we brag a lot about how much progress we're making in California, but frankly, Lord Mayor, I was blown away with what's happening in South Australia. So just talk about your progress on the path to decarbonization.
Well, we talk a lot about what nations decide amongst themselves, but when it actually comes to it, the boots on the ground and the shovels belong to the subnationals, whether it's the state leadership or the local councils. And we were blessed about 10 years before Paris, because our state government had the vision to recognize that we needed to have a stable energy supply that actually avoided any shutdowns and problems over time. But on top of that, had a decarbonisation route, and also was a transition to renewables. They put in legislation that was way ahead of its time. We copied California a little bit. And that legislation encouraged and changed the planning laws so that wind power was easier to install. We gave incentives across a whole range of domestic uses, And we built the very first large-scale battery in the world that could help us over the difficult periods. And amazingly now, we've reached 76% renewables in our whole system in the state. And on top of that, more than 50% of our houses have rooftop solar. 40% of our power comes from wind, and we're on path to be transitioned completely to 100% renewables within 5 years. This is an amazing achievement, and the reality is that subnational governments have done that because they had the vision and are nimble and are committed.
It's incredible and proof positive of why these dialogues are so important. We're stronger together. You know, there are differences across our continents and across our countries, our states, our regions, but there are so many similarities. So I'm excited to spend more time with you over the next couple of days to learn more about how we can emulate the policies of South Australia, because it's incredible where you are at on this transition.
And I have to tell you, we got the idea from California and we learned from them because they're great role models.
Well, it is one team, one challenge. Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Great to speak to you.
Yeah, what's interesting is I honestly didn't realize that South Australia had built a lot of its renewable energy legislation around California's, but it's just in my mind, a great example of how we learn from each other. But just to give you a little flavor of that environment where we were over the last 3 days, you have people from all nations. So you have people in different cultural dress. Most of the discussions were in, you're wearing translation sets. So there's about 5 different languages being translated. You're popping into round tables, which are a little bit more of a deep dive. You're also seeing plenaries. You're talking on plenaries. We organize what are called bilateral meetings, which is the fancy, it's like a one-on-one between 2 governments or multiple governments, multilateral meetings. So you're doing those meetings on the side. It's pretty exhausting, but it's also pretty exhilarating.
Yeah.
I did want to share a few examples that have come into my mind I was actually talking to a reporter, I think last night, and I shared a couple of these examples that were on my mind around where we've gotten good ideas, because it's really important. Like, yes, we're proud of our progress in California. We think we're a leader. We are a leader, but we also learn from others and benefit from others. So on the subject of Australia, my last speaker series was on climate science and debate and the Delta, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And the scientist on that discussion reminded me that they have a new technology called Aqua Watch in the Delta that's early monitoring for harmful algal blooms in the Delta. Well, interestingly, that technology was shared with us by the Australian Science Agency. And that partnership was developed out of an agreement between California and Australia. This summer, I was tracking progress on the implementation of our Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, our ability to bring our groundwater aquifers into balance. And one huge step forward was the improvement we made on being able to measure and help regions measure their groundwater balances, which is a Danish technology. And that Danish technology was only made aware to us because of an agreement that we had with the Danish Environment Ministry. And then lastly, and importantly, when we think about the Los Angeles fires that happened in January, 2 nations come to mind, Mexico and Israel. Mexico literally sending us boots on the ground, Mexican firefighters to add to our force that was working to put out those fires. And then fire utilized imaging tech developed by companies through an agreement. Remarkably, the list sort of goes on of what we get from these discussions and these partnerships. So really excited to share a few of those examples. Amanda, I think that a lot of the importance of being here is developing these relationships, because I know as a negotiator, you're building trust, but we're also building working partnerships. So talk about the role of like leaders, but also personal relationships across countries.
Yeah, I mean, the value of convening and getting together regularly with counterparts who do your work in other places is when you have a problem, you can pick up the phone and call them. So, if I'm struggling to think through a challenge related to nature-based solutions, that I know some of my partners may have thought through, I know who to call. The same goes back for me, is people know that, we're here for you if you have a question, or if we can be a sounding board. I think also, there's a certain level of, as you build more trust and credibility, you can be more honest with one another. Of course, not everyone has all the answers, but sometimes you don't want to necessarily say how little you might know about something.
Yeah.
And having those relationships with people allows you to be a little bit more vulnerable and get the information that you really need. This is timely work. We don't have time for people's sort of egos and embarrassment to get in the way. So I think the value of these regular convenings is you can build that sort of trust and openness that is required to tackle some of the things that are just really hard.
So true. And yesterday we ran into just one of those leaders who we've developed a pretty remarkable relationship with. I want to share this next video. Here on day 2 in Rio de Janeiro at the Local Leaders Forum, here with a colleague and at this point a good friend, Jean Lemaire. He is the climate envoy for Quebec. You have a past work life as a polar explorer and one of Canada's most famous documentarians. And now you've committed your career to this climate and biodiversity diplomacy.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing here, on behalf of Quebec, and what this COP30 means to your region.
Well, I think it's a very, very important moment because we can feel that it's not working great at UN in terms of parties, of countries. So now the subnationals are there to really, do the work.
Yeah.
So and we can feel that before we had different COPs where people were bringing targets and all that. Now it's time to implement that, and for implementation it's at this subnational level. We are the best for that.
Yeah, and a lot of people might not know that Quebec and California have been advancing one of the world's best, I would say, sort of programs to cut carbon pollution and generate funding.
Exactly.
To protect our communities. And that is, of course, what we have been calling our cap and trade or cap and invest system. Talk a little bit about how our two governments have worked together.
Well, first of all, I think we have the best system, the best carbon market, to be honest. And it's great because it showed that subnational from different countries can work together.
Yeah.
And for us it's essential. We receive around $1 billion per year with that system, and by law you have to invest that money to fight against climate change.
Like in what kind of things?
Well, like transport, for example. Around 45% of our GHG emission come from transport. Then we can help for electric car, but also invest in electric buses.
Yeah.
So all that is very, very important.
It's incredible. And in California, just because of the size of our economy, we've generated over $20 billion over a decade in this cap and invest program. That's the same thing. It's allowed us to reinvest in communities, improving the quality of life, protecting people, and of course cutting carbon pollution. Now, we sort of see Quebec as a huge leader in this movement of regions, of states, of cities.
Yeah.
Not only on climate change, but also on biodiversity. So we're here in Brazil as part of this UN summit on climate change, but you all have also led on this UN treaty on protecting nature and biodiversity. Can you talk about the sort of intersection between climate change and biodiversity from your view?
Well, I think it's very, very important. First of all, if we want to win that battle, we have to bring the public, with us.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easier to bring the public on nature, because everybody likes nature. So it's normal that you want to protect what you like, Climate change is very important, of course, but they are interlinked.
Yes.
So this is very, very important. But I think that now we have to change our communication and bring the public with nature, and with the nature-based solution. We also fight climate change, but through nature. So I think this is a very important turn point right now.
And it's a bit crazy that historically, the UN segmented nature protection and climate change. That's, of course, changing. We're about to break out into a discussion on nature-based solutions and a policy exchange. So nature is playing a center, taking a center role here in Brazil. I just want to thank you, though, because part of what we do is exchange ideas. And a lot of Californians know of our 30 by 30 program, which of course is a major focus of Quebec. Folks may not know that almost every nation in the world agreed to this 30.
We had a bit of a technical difficulty there, but you got a lot of Jean Lemaire. I ended by saying he's just one of the most beloved climate envoys, incredibly hardworking. And the part of the interview you missed is we started talking about how we are borrowing or learning from their approach with Indigenous leaders and communities in Quebec and Canada, where they are funding Indigenous guardians to protect natural areas and actually have designated a new protected area owned and managed by Indigenous communities. So when we started talking about traditional ecological knowledge in California. But in any event, you get the idea. Now we are bringing on another guest in just a little bit. This is a little bit of catch Ken for Amanda and I. So she's left the screen for a little bit, but she'll be back in a moment. Jean said something important, and this was a real theme over the last 3 days. Now keep in mind, we're only at the beginning of the UN Climate Summit. We're in Rio right now, as we said, with all of these leaders from cities, states, regions. And then this discussion will move to Belém, which is a city in the Amazon, where the official negotiations of parties and this broader set of conversations will happen. But the discussion here among local, regional leaders is just the need to help our residents and everybody understand why we're taking these actions. Obviously, to protect people from these extreme events that are getting worse with climate change, to protect public health, because cutting pollution, yes, it cuts carbon emissions, but it also improves air quality. And that's a big deal for communities that have been impacted disproportionately by pollution. And then, of course, because we want to go where the economic growth is. Our governor and legislature talk about this a lot. I use Wayne Gretzky's line when he was asked why he was so good. He said he moves to where the puck is going, not where the puck was, or is, I should say. And so we talked a lot about how people are communicating on this with their residents, given mayors and governors and state and local governments are closer to people than the national governments. So I met a really interesting politician. She's a Hungarian politician, elected official from Budapest. And she's actually the president of a huge universe of local leaders in Europe. So I want to cue up that video because it touches on these themes.
So we are here in Rio with Kata Tuto, who is a Hungarian elected official and actually the leader of a really interesting organization of local leaders across Europe. Can you talk a little bit about your organization and why you're here?
Yes, gladly. It's called the European Committee of the Regions. It's not a committee, it's a big parliament. We have more than 700 locally elected politicians. I mean, it means it's mayors, mayors from towns, metropolitan areas, regions, we have the islands, mountain areas. So we have all the local realities in a parliament in Europe. What do? We digest European legislation. There's a lot of things going on in Europe, a lot of legislation, regulation, and in the end, it's us, the mayors, local leaders, who have to implement it. So we try to make regulation better. We bring our realities, super diverse, 27 member states, from Spain to Finland, from Bulgaria to my hometown, Budapest, of very different realities. But this is how we do it. It's a cooperation. We try to make all the things work in
Incredible.
Europe.
So what's your take on this local leaders forum and how are local leaders across Europe actually driving forward? A lot of us in the United States or California, we may follow national leaders across Europe, but how are local leaders driving forward on climate change in Europe?
Now, we have a lot of ambition in Europe. So we decided together that we will try to become, we have to become climate neutral by 2050. This is a must, okay. How do we get there? Because it's not a centralized machine. Europe, everybody has to find its own path. It means that all national governments have to find their own path together with the cities and regions. We are super ambitious. We have a lot of mayors, 100 mayors in Europe, who said that they want to become climate neutral by 2030. So they are making climate city contracts. It means it's not just the city, not just the government, not just the EU. We have businesses, universities, and citizens. We do a lot of participatory stuff, because if the citizens don't want to get climate neutral, we won't get climate neutral.
That was one of my favorite points that you made in one of the sessions that we were in, is that our governments are close to the people. So we have to connect the dots for our residents,
Yeah.
and help them understand what happens if we don't take action and the benefits for taking action, right?
I think it's more complicated. It's not anymore about facts. This is how we worked before, like putting down facts and figures. That doesn't work anymore. It doesn't. It's all a trust issue, because there are a lot of information out there and there's an attention deficit. And what is also out there is acceleration with the speed less and less people can follow. And there is a burnout, a social burnout, because there's constant state of emergency, climate is changing, you will die, AI is coming, you will die, jobs are gone, you will die. People are in this constant state of emergency. We are pushing them to run constantly. More and more people are getting tired and looking for an alternative reality. Okay, so what do? You need leaders who people actually know and see and can touch and hold responsible for their words, and see that all these climate actions we are talking about, it won't cost their lives, okay? We retrofit their homes, make their cities more livable, we plant more trees. Yes, maybe we will have less cars, but public spaces will actually be connecting citizens and not divide them. We create more spaces for people to feel at home, to feel safe, because they are part of society. And Europe try to make it affordable. That's a big issue, because who is going to pay for all this action, investing in clean water, in green spaces, in affordable housing? Somebody has to pay. So there's a negotiation going on, but we all say we are support. We in Europe, our leaders meet all the time, the local leaders, because we are a support group.
Yeah.
We want to see other leaders survive climate actions,
Yep.
getting reelected, and if we see others who make bold steps,
Yeah.
and survive and get reelected, others say, okay, if he could do it, if she could do it, I will do it.
We
I'll
can.
try.
As I hear you talk, I see so many parallels between our own country, the United States. We have dozens of American mayors here. And to your point, you and local elected leaders are those that residents trust, because they know and they elect, and they get thrown out of office if they don't trust. So I'm so thankful for what you're doing and coming here. And this demonstrates just how we build solidarity and learn from each other, very far away from each other and across borders.
We do, we politicians are humans. A lot of people forget this, that we are humans too. We need this support group, because we have our challenges, our difficulties. We talk about greening things here. It seems super easy, but the concept of green is nice. The reality is very hard.
Yeah.
So we share these stories, what works, what does not work.
Yeah.
And, if you see somebody who has ambition, it also motivates you. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
totally.
he can do it. Maybe I can do it. Maybe not the same path. Maybe I have to find my own path, the own pace.
Yeah.
But I will try.
It's so energizing.
It is.
Huge thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you
Wonderful
very
to meet
much.
you.
It was
And best of
a
luck.
Pleasure. You too. You too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she gave a couple of really impressive presentations and gives you a flavor of, the kind of leaders that are here, but also the kind of discussions that we're having. We're going to go into a discussion tomorrow just on communicating, on really making clear to residents, what's happening and how we're doing this work, because it's so critical that people understand and can appreciate, why these transitions are happening. So I'll share that one of the interesting things that comes out of these discussions is you'll talk to governments, multiple times over multiple years, and what you'll realize is that you have a lot in common. And in fact, you have so much in common that you decide to do something about it. And that brings us to our next conversation with a colleague of mine from Athens, Greece.
I ran into a colleague, Konstantina Karidi, and a friend who is based in Athens. But Konstantina, you and I partner on the Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership, which was actually born out of a COP like several years ago. Can you share a little bit about what we call MCAP, or the Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership, is?
Yes, there are many initiatives around the world, but I think MCAP stands out, and not because we started together, but because it really covered a gap. So MCAP is an alliance that California started, and we're very modest for not saying it, so I should say it was your own initiative, together with Catalonia. So brought together two very important, powerful subnational governments of the world in order to give voice and a platform to other regions that are in the Mediterranean bioregions of the world. So we say Mediterranean. As a Greek, I thought, what do you mean? Mediterranean is like Europe. No, the Mediterranean climate is actually located in regions like Western Cape, South Wales and California. So, in Australia, California, of course. So giving voice to those regions is what MCAP does on the one hand, and on the other hand, is creating the circumstances to amplify projects and initiatives on what we call the ground, and an expression I hate, but in reality, basically connecting political stuff and technical stuff in order to address extreme challenges that we're facing. Wildfires, drought, extreme heat, and of course you have floods, but we don't address that, just underlying.
Yeah.
Did I say a lot?
It's amazing. And as you point out, 15 governments from 5 different continents. We all have the same climate, and as you point out, as a result, we face the same climate threats.
Yes.
So I'm really excited with the progress that we're making actually on projects to reduce threats from the wildfire, heat, and drought, as you say. Will MCAP be doing anything here at the COP?
Yes, the MCAP is present. First of all, we are here on the local leaders forum, and next week we'll be in the LAM. We'll be co-hosting 2 events together with California, and you were present together with Catalonia, hosted by Regions 4 at the Regions 2 coalition. So we are actively present, and why? Because here we're trying to, as I said, give this voice. And why does this matter? It matters because we are living under it's not a good time. It's not a good time for the world. We have governments which are serious detractors when it comes to climate change. So once again, in 10 years after the Paris COP that brought some national governments into the forefront, we are somehow revisiting this, and we're saying, no, we should have a bigger voice. And Resilience is Catalyst, we're supporting this, I think, with passion, and we need a little bit of passion as well.
Yeah, we need passion, and we need progress. And in our partnership of Mediterranean climates, governments there, we have both. So huge thanks for what you're doing.
I want to give one example,
Yeah.
which I think we can really use. There was no way that the region of central Greece would have been in contact with, for example, Santiago de Chile on heat. Through MCAP, the region of central Greece and Santiago de Chile are now collaborating in order to bring what Santiago de Chile is doing to Greece, and a completely different part of the world, in order to have governance changes and to support citizens, identify solutions for extreme heat within 2 cities in central Greece. So central Greece is suddenly stepping up, collaborating with Santiago de Chile.
With the government in Chile. Yeah, and there's all sorts of partnerships that's happening between California and states in Australia through this Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership on wildfire. And then we've learned a ton from South Africa, for example, on drought management.
Oh my God, that was incredible.
Yeah, well, huge thanks, and great to see you as always.
Thank you.
So you get the idea, and hopefully these videos are helpful. Literally all day, every day over the last few days are these conversations. But Amanda, let's now shift into this COP, this moment. So we have accelerating climate change. One of our colleagues from the state of Querétaro in Mexico actually couldn't be with us because of devastating floods that they're experiencing this week. And at the same time, we have an absent, U.S. federal government. We have real, frustration about the lack of progress to achieve these national targets. So I don't want to sugarcoat this. There's a lot of energy in this discussion, but what are subnationals starting to suggest needs to happen around these COPs, and like how do we accelerate this progress we know we need to make?
Yeah. Well, part of what's beautiful about the agreement that was reached in Paris is there was a recognition that our ability to really reduce emissions is going to grow over time, that we're not going to have like a linear, every year we'll achieve, X percent, just incrementally, it doesn't really work like that. So the idea behind these nationally determined contributions, which are basically a country's commitment and plan to reduce their emissions by X percent, they're due every 5 years. And the intention behind the agreement was that each 5 years, every single time a nationally contribution comes forward, it would be more ambitious, because we expect that as technologies start to scale, as innovation begins to grow, as societies become more used to successfully uptaking and making these changes, that change will happen more quickly. So on the one hand, it is true, countries are not there. They're not on track to hit the global goal. However, I think it was always kind of built in that we would be starting at a slower pace. So I think there's a tension there. And the other interesting thing is that this is a year where the nationally determined contributions are going to be submitted to the UN. And not all of them have been submitted yet. So we'll see at the end of the year what we're looking at.
Yeah, I'm really encouraged that the UN was very clear, because we met with UN officials too, that they see a real role for states and regions and cities to be a little bit more central in the implementation of all this. Now, we don't need to go to an international summit to continue to make progress. We're doing that. But as I think we've been discussing, this helps us accelerate our progress and then get others to accelerate theirs. Now, our last governor, Jerry Brown, and his team developed a really interesting coalition of states and regions, provinces from around the world called the Under 2 Coalition. The idea being keeping temperature increase below a 2% or 2 Celsius degree increase. That Under 2 Coalition has built to be comprised of governments that represent over half of the global GDP, the global economy. And one of our last videos I'll share with you is with one of our colleagues who is sort of the manager of this coalition that California helped to start, really talking about what the Under 2 Coalition wants from this UN process. So if we can roll my discussion with Champa Patel. I'm here with one of my colleagues, and over the years has become a friend, Champa Patel. She helps to lead what's called the Under 2 Coalition. This is a coalition of the willing of governments from around the world, regional, states, provincial governments, representing over half of the global GDP, leaning in on climate change. Champa, why are our governments, our subnational governments, important, and what are you working on in Under 2 to actually have impact?
So the reason that it's important is because this level of government has so many powers, whether it's fiscal, regulatory, or legal, right? So they can really accelerate action because they have the tools at their disposal to do that. And we see that with California, the carbon market that you've set up with Quebec and Washington State. This is some of the creativity and innovation that we're seeing happening at subnational level. But the real question is, how do we scale that? How do we replicate that across other jurisdictions? Because we see the national governments are not moving as fast as we need them to move, but states and regions are. So what can we do as a coalition to help foster that action?
It's incredible, and the Under 2 leadership has spawned the Subnational Methane Action Coalition, which is reducing the super pollutants. You're focused this year on here at the COP with us and trying to build more durable financial instruments so that our subnational governments can take action. What does success look like over the next decade?
So for me, success is states and regions have high ambition, so we know that.
Yeah.
There's not an ambition crisis, but we know from many states and regions what they lack is financing. So a critical lever to unlock their ambition is not in place. So our job is to make sure that they do have access to those resources, whether that's financial, whether that's technical, whether that's capacity building, to really know how to build that pipeline of bankable projects. So I think that's where we add value. How do we support states to put together their plans, make sure they're investable, and then connect them to the financiers? And that way we can really accelerate the action that's needed.
Yeah, and we're talking the talk, but also walking the walk. Under2 is hosting this effort this year at this COP to develop or to have each subnational government that can submit these roadmaps to meet its ambition. We have over 70% of the members of the Under2 coalition that have submitted these roadmaps to actually achieve our ambition, which is really super important.
Yeah, and then, again, it shows like the high level of ambition within the coalition. But what we need to make sure is that those subnational transition plans are investable plans.
Yeah.
And what can we do to make sure that the private sector, the financial sector, and the insurance sector, how do we crowd in the real economy actors to make sure that these governments can take these plans and actually translate them into action? I think that's the next step change we need to see.
Yeah, it's complex and not necessarily easy to understand, but the critical work of actually ensuring that we can meet our ambition. And of course, our ambition is all about limiting temperature increase and the destruction that it will create. So Champa, huge thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Onward all together.
Well, hopefully you got a good sense of how we're trying to institutionalize the work of subnational governments and why it makes a really important difference. So that's a big thrust. Now, listen, we are very fortunate to have Josh Becker with us. Josh, as probably most everyone knows, is a state senator from California. He's an environmental leader in our legislature. He's helping represent California and ensuring the legislature has a presence. Josh, you had a very busy fall working with your colleagues and the governor on extending Cap and Invest, building a region-wide energy market to lower energy costs, so much, but you made it down here. I'm interested, we haven't talked I guess I saw you this morning at something, but we didn't connect. What's your take? I mean, you've had a few days here. What are your impressions? What do you want people in California to understand, about what's happening?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I'm saying for me, this is really a good news event because I'm hearing a lot of good news. And whereas at the sort of meta level, the press, especially obviously from the United States, has been negative news actions that the federal government has done to undermine clean energy or undermine some of our conservation efforts. But here, there's just lots of positive news that's coming from mayors of cities in the U.S. A lot of mayors are actually here. It's coming from other countries. It's coming from businesses, the business community pledges, and not just pledges, but actually commitments that they're making. DHL buying 1 billion liters of sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. By the Formula One, F1 have no fossil fuels in the engines next year. So really across the board, just a lot more positive, and that's why I think people are looking for a little bit of hope right now. And when they learn about your efforts, the Newsom administration and the efforts you personally led around and leading right now around conservation, around 30 by 30, like the results are actually staggering when people learn about them. And same when they hear about the session that we just had, you mentioned, reauthorizing, reaffirming, really strengthening our cap and invest. That's our fundamental price on carbon and what we do with those proceeds to help everyday Californians. It's work we did to clean the grid, but also lower utility costs. This past year, all the work we've done on wildfire. I get to share those stories again and learn from others as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you and I are down here as governmental leaders, but it's really important to share that there are leaders from non-governmental organizations, NGOs. We have members of our California Air Resources Board. Yeah. We have local government leaders. We participated in an event last night with the LA Clean Tech Incubator. So this California delegation,
the
Innovation Center, yeah. innovation, yeah.
No, you
clean
said it
tech.
right. I was saying like that was right. Another part that I forgot to mention too, the innovation community
Yeah.
being represented here, talking about, we were at a breakfast today and the guy was talking about clean cement and, scientists and the progress they're making in these kind of hard to abate sectors.
Totally.
Right, yeah.
And it's multi-sectoral. And I think the point that was made at breakfast today was, yes, government matters, but so does the private sector, certainly. And, conservation organizations, science has a role to play. So there have been some questions that have come into Q&A about, what's sort of the presence of communities or young people or academics, scientists. From our perspective, the more Californians that participate in these UN climate summits, the better. As Amanda was talking about, there are the negotiation sessions of the nations, but there is so much work on solutions that's happening around that. And so we'll be seeing a lot more folks here in Belém in the next couple of weeks. I guess over the next couple of weeks. Josh, what's your hope for this conference of parties?
Well, I think, again, there's a couple, there's the meta piece, as you say, the negotiations, making sure, and that was one of the points that Gina McCarthy made last night, the America All In really pavilion, I guess you might call it, which will also be represented at Belém, say that we've cut coal consumption by half since Paris. We've doubled clean energy. These are national stats, of course, much, much more in California. And we've actually now, I think as of probably last month, like fully eliminated coal in California. So I think it's there is those governmental, like trying to push everybody along towards targets. But then there's the actual implementation, right? So a chance to say, hey, here's what we're doing in California. Here's what we just accomplished. But we want to hear what you've accomplished. We want to hear your ideas. And that's what happened last time I was at COP was Glasgow. We met Reuven Carlisle from Washington State. They took our cap and trade system in California. They improved upon it. And then when it came for us time to reauthorize and reaffirm, we looked to them.
Yeah.
And I did a couple other bills that he had done in Washington State, and he did a couple of my other bills. So I was talking to the governor of New Mexico yesterday, and they're now the fourth state following our lead to do a clean fuel standard. And we were talking about that. And so it's really about this effort of learning from each other. And as I said, a lot of positive stories.
Yeah.
With the mayor of Boise, Idaho, they have an all-electric fire station, an all-electric police station. Okay, well, yeah, I guess we can do that in my district too.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible, and again, not papering over accelerating climate change. We know we have to move further and faster, but we do it together, and we help each other move further and faster. So I'm with you. Like, this has been an energizing few days. Yeah. Clear-eyed about the challenges we face, but also, optimistic that we're going to continue to drive forward progress, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. As you said, yeah, clear out on the challenges. I know in Belém, I was just asked last night, I'll be by some folks from our air districts who will be there. I'll be on a panel on wildfire. It's, something you and I have spent a lot of time on when I did the budget side of resources and obviously been a massive focus of your time as well. But, that's a global issue now. Places in the world that didn't burn before are now burning, and we can share technologies, we can share learnings from that as well, and that's what we'll be doing.
It's incredible, and I want to share that we've got some powerful colleagues from state government who are joining us in Brazil in coming days. We have the governor's tribal secretary, Cristina Snyder Ashtari, really highlighting the importance of indigenous leadership, both in California but across the world. Alice Reynolds, the president of our California Public Utilities Commission, driving forward, leading the way on our energy transition. Lauren Sanchez, our new chair of the California Air Resources Board, and our agricultural secretary, Karen Ross, who is well known in these international fora for all of her leadership and connections.
Oh, well, yeah. I did a resolution this year, because people don't realize that a large portion of oil that is destructively unearthed, let's just say, in the Amazon region comes to California. And so we did a resolution that was bipartisan and unanimous to start the process of how do we get off of oil from the Amazon. And we had indigenous leaders from the Ecuadorian Amazon in Sacramento with us, and we'll be meeting with lots of indigenous leaders and this is the first COP ever in the kind of greater
Like-
Amazon region. So it's a great opportunity for it.
It's amazing. Yeah. And Brazil made a point of that. The Amazon region across several countries, larger than the contiguous United States, and also the place where over 50 million people live.
Yeah.
So maybe a last point is one real important theme is this is about people. We got some questions about the Bill Gates memo that came, that was made public here in the last few days, and I haven't had a chance to review that. That'll be a conversation for another time. But one thing that we're hearing here is this has to work for people, whether it's people struggling to have a livelihood in the middle of the Amazon, or somebody that just has a 9-to-5 job that can barely get home and get food on the table. It has to work for people. We have to connect this with people, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And doing conservation in a way that actually kind of creates jobs, that makes people want to take care of either a natural beauty that could be a natural attraction, but that works in a way that, as you say, that gives the incentive for everyone to protect that land and also benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 6 o'clock here in Brazil. You've been going, gosh, saw each other at 8 in the morning. You probably had that suit on all day. I just changed. I want to bring Amanda back into the camera because Amanda and so many other staff, sit down, across the state are really the ones that are holding the laboring oar, that are drafting these agreements between California and these other states, that are doing all of the analysis that leads to these discussions that we're having. Maybe we'll give you the last word. What would you have? We've been joined by, almost 200 people here from California. What's your sort of final word before we sign off here?
Well, I guess I would say final word to those of you in California is just to say, please don't despair. There's just so much commitment and innovation and camaraderie that I agree with you, Senator Becker, that there's unfortunately a lot of stories that sort of suggest the opposite. But what we see when we're at these convenings is just people who are really ready to get to work and to steal liberally from one another in order to move further faster together.
Yeah.
So have hope.
Yeah, and really excited to come back to California with a lot of new learnings, new things that we can adopt, hope, maybe new legislation, Senator, and work with all of you. I mean, state government is one small piece of the climate movement in California. California is showing the world what a transition looks like, and all eyes are on us. So no pressure, but we've got to move further and faster.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for joining. Take care. We've got a last slide, which is if you have any questions or comments, suggestions, follow-up points, or even suggestions for other discussions, hit us up at secretarysuggestions@resources.ca.gov. Thanks so much for your interest, your leadership, your engagement, and ultimately maintaining hope and taking action. We'll see you again soon.